Hello, I am very excited to have Benh Zeitlin here to talk about his new film, Wendy. What a beautiful, mystical, glorious film that you have made, Ben. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you premiered the film at Sundance this year in January, and I suppose none of us could have known then what sort of world we'd find ourselves in now. So
it was the last movie ever on Earth.
Yeah. You just kind of slipped into the last sort of festival. How's it been since? Is it weird? I mean, I guess my question is, are you sort of bummed that you're not having that regular kind of festival kind of tour experience, or do you find that a bit painful and difficult? And is it actually nicer to be sitting in where are you? Where do you live?
I'm in New Orleans. Yeah, it's a bit of both, there are certain places I really wanted to come, Australia being one of them, actually. I was really looking forward to it, so it breaks my heart for certain things, but also, it was like, I definitely spent many a night wishing that I had some time to think and be alone and read and write and like refill my mind with new ideas. And so, it's very surreal. I don't know, it's both things, but I certainly miss having gotten to come to Australia because I really enjoyed it last time. And I also had my trip cut short. So I was like, oh, I'm going to make up for it this time.
Because that must have been a pretty kind of crazy year, or maybe more than a year for you after Beasts.
Yeah.
I actually met you outside of the forum at MIFF very briefly when you were there for Beasts, and I hadn't seen the film at that point. Otherwise, I would have been way less cool than I was. Because but I remember hearing about it. I remember hearing the buzz about the film around the festival, and everyone was sort of so excited to see it. And I imagine that year must have been kind of insane for you. And many different things, but did you by and large enjoy that kind of experience, or was it just overwhelming?
It was weird. There are moments that were really incredible. It was really strange to not do any work. Like I didn't do any creative work for a long time. It was the longest I'd ever not been active, just making something. And that was strange. That was strange. And obviously, I mean, it really, Beast was such a friends and family project. We never expected anyone to see it. So just like the scale of what I expected my life to be to what my life was that year was just, I don't know. It was truly surreal, but it was an adventure, I don't know if I would have wanted to do it again. So in some ways I'm grateful to just be back to work, more quickly, because I really needed that too. So, but like I said, I do miss, there's some things that I missed out on that I really feel.
Yeah. It is a funny one though. You kind of have to take all this time out of your kind of creative work to promote and sell a film around the world. And it's sort of, it's a strange kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a job I never expected to have, that's for sure.
So you wrote Wendy with your sister, Eliza,
yeah.
correct? So yeah. I'm really curious to know about that process, the process of kind of co-writing with your sister, and just about your childhood in general, because there's so much kind of, there's so many sort of themes about the kind of the energy and life force of children and childhood kind of memories throughout your work. And I'm wondering what that experience was like writing with your sister.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly connects us to, we had a dense and wild imaginary world as kids, and we really were, had an amazing childhood where we were really allowed to run wild and encouraged to imagine and all these things. And certainly always, for some reason, like there was no real, I have wonderful parents, I had great examples of adults in my life, but for some reason we were just absolutely terrified of growing up. Like every game that we had, when you turned 13 or something, you were expelled from whatever world it was, And so there was always this, and I think a lot of it had to do with, we were so attached to our imaginations and so attached to kind of this, like freedom of thought that you have as a kid. And we just had a sense that was something you had to trade for adulthood. And that trade and that choice always is something that really scared us. And always drew us closer to Peter. You know, he was really a figure in our lives from that age. And we sort of came back to the story at this stage when we'd been making art in this totally wild, you know, utopic, reckless, innocent way, and feeling the change that was gonna happen to us from having had be sort of unexpectedly become so, you know, seen so much and have pressure around the next film. This story kind of came back of, you know, how are we going to sort of continue to be wild and free and reckless in this sort of world of grown-ups, you know, that we had always felt very uncomfortable in. And so in some ways, you know, our early experiences as small children informed us coming together to write this film.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in that. How you kind of managed to merge that guerrilla style filmmaking with a more kind of grown up, for lack of a better term, style of making movies, bigger budgets and stuff like that. Because there is such a sense of joyful play in your films, and I can't imagine that it doesn't feel that way on set, but maybe it does. I mean, it's hard to watch your movies and think that it's not fun to be making them. So, you know, I'm curious about how you manage to keep that kind of joyful abandon happening with bigger budgets and I guess more sort of pressure through a second film.
Yeah, I mean, we fought very, very hard to preserve it, you know, and the challenges that we set up for ourselves almost mandated that approach. You know, we shot the film entirely on location. We were on a live ocean with a real boat. We were on an active volcano. We were miles and miles past the ends of civilization, shooting like expedition style, you know, in the jungle and on the beaches, and with all non-professional actors, with all these kids that were not like chosen because they were well behaved. They were chosen because they had this spark of energy that was uncontrollable. And so, you know, we desperately wanted to hold on to that, you know, and you know, we wanted to use the opportunity that we had for Beast just to make choices that were impossible, you know, just fly against every conventional wisdom about how to efficiently make a film, how to, you know, be able to predict what's going to happen. And we wanted to invite a lot of chaos and a lot of spontaneity into the process in order to kind of preserve that joyful spark that very quickly can get kind of bludgeoned out of a film just by all of the structure that filmmaking traditionally has.
So what sort of ways, just practically, do you do that on set? I mean, I know it's so difficult with kids, especially. I mean, you have limited, you know, hours with them, and there's so much that you need to do to make sure that they're sort of safe on set. But do you have kind of a tool bag of tricks that you tend to use with those kids to find that kind of playfulness and joyfulness when they're starting to get a little heady about it or into rhythms or patterns?
For sure, yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is that just the fact of making a film with those type of kids actually mandates that your set have a joy to it, because if it's not fun, the kids just will not. They have no other reason to be there. You know, these kids weren't kids that grew up with parents telling them they had to be an actor. They had no sense of like, you know, they understand they have a job, but they don't really know what that means. They don't care that they're being paid. None of that matters. You know, what matters is the experience and the relationships. And so, you know, no matter how difficult the situation is, you know, you have to kind of make that space when a kid arrives on set to play, you know, even if you're hours behind in your day and you're losing shots and the sun's going down, you have to make that space to, when the kid shows up, you're going to just hand clap for 5 minutes, you know, while everyone's pulling their hair out, and but you have to protect that, because that joy is what allows them to perform, and you know, it has the added benefit of hopefully there's like real joy in the movie. And that was something we really wanted to make sure that we captured, because I always find that there's certain things that film is really good at capturing. It's like pain, people getting shot in the face and like screaming like that, like torture. Film is great with that stuff, but it's really hard to get like a real party or like a sense of someone really having a good time. You know, you very, very rarely see it. And so we really prioritize that. And every circumstance we set up for ourselves, as difficult as it made the production and the process, hopefully it sort of left us with some true moments of glee, that I think are always difficult to capture.
Yeah, the hardest, but then the best when you get them. It's sort of
Yeah.
that's what you're there for. Do you
Yeah.
think they enjoyed it, the kids? I mean, all being non-actors, this being their first sort of.
Yeah, they, I mean, not every day, not every moment, and certainly the hardest thing for kids, like, I think they really love the story, and these were incredibly wild places we were going, and the adventure of that was a thrill for them. I think the biggest challenge with kids is like take 8, that they don't understand. It's like when you play a game, you do it once and you move on. You don't like repeat your game over and over again. And so, that sort of the repetition, there's certain things that they got frustrated with, but, there was a real, we really, these kids, we were family, we met them 5, 6 years old. We worked with them for 2 years. We learned to swim together. We learned to act together. We grew up together. And then by the time we were doing it, that bond really, it runs deep, and it's what allowed us to sort of get through the hard times, is, the kids doing it for each other, and, doing it for me and our sort of family of the film.
All the kids are amazing in it. They're really wonderful. I think, Devon, who plays Wendy, especially, she's magic. Do you find, I mean, I know you do really extensive casting, and you go into kind of schools and community centers and all sorts of places that you wouldn't normally find, that, you're not looking just for acting kids, but do you find that when you see it, instantly, or is it a little trickier than that? That sometimes you have to go back and look at kids again and again and work with them a little bit, or do you kind of have those moments where you suddenly go, oh, there she is? It
depends. I think the spark, when we refer to it as like, this kid has IT, they have it. It's like whatever that is. There's a light in their eyes. There's something that you can tell very quickly if a kid likes the sensation of acting, when they fall into character. Does that thrill them? Those are sort of fundamentals. But there's a lot of, but we call back the kids 7, 8 times. There's so many different factors that go into them actually being able to, beyond just having this incredible talent and a spark and just a light in their eyes and a face you can kind of put a camera on and sink into, their versatility, their ability to learn lines, their ability to adapt and take direction and get along with other kids. And, every single one of those things is huge. And for this film, especially, it was one thing to kind of be able to act in the comfort of a classroom. It's a whole other thing to be able to act on an active volcano in sweltering sun with no bathroom around. It was very, very special. People who could be involved in this film and kids who really could adapt to very challenging circumstances. There was nothing like anything they'd ever experienced before. And within that, be able to still turn it on and give a performance. And so there was a lot of years of work went into bringing the kids to these locations, making sure that they could deal, that they weren't afraid.
How did you find the location? Tell me a little bit about that, about how you ended up on that island.
It's funny. So I'd heard about the islands. A crew member on Beast, so the Southern Wild, grew up in Montserrat, and had told me the story of the volcano there. And originally, I think the Neverland we had sort of conceived as New Orleans in Louisiana, actually. And then at some point, it just didn't. Something about it didn't feel like. I felt like we had to go. There had to be sort of an exploration into the unknown, and we came to this idea. We were trying to think about kind of what natural phenomenon would be like a fountain of youth, and we came to this idea of volcanoes being kind of where creation happens, where if there's like a youthful moment on Earth, it's in the creation of the volcano, where like Earth is born. And so once we sort of found that, I remembered this story about Montserrat, and there's all this connection between Louisiana and the Caribbean, and it made a ton of sense. And so I went out, basically just got on a plane by myself and went to the island, and found not only that, but there's also similar to just finding a kid. It's like certain places really feel like they want to have a movie made in collaboration. We're literally looking for like a place that's a character, that's a collaborator, that has people that really want to be involved. It wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't had a huge amount of the crew and a huge amount of just cooperation and allies in Montserrat. And so, I both went and sort of found this amazing location, but also just a couple of people that were made me realize, this will be like a really valuable, this will benefit both the film and the place, and this is going to be like a beautiful kind of community that we can create between our Louisiana crew, our American crew, and this island.
Yeah, right. And at that stage, are you still drafting with Eliza? Like, the two of you sort of, does the location affect what ends up on the page? And it feels like that's an organic kind of process for your films.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the way that we kind of approach, we did the same thing on Beast, really. We sort of will write a first draft that's kind of a framework of a story, and then it's kind of this exploration to find where that story really exists. Even though it's a fantastical story, it's like what in reality expresses these magical things, and that goes both for the people. It was like we always, our whole life, wanted to meet Peter Pan, and one of the beauties of this film is we had to go find him. And we found a kid who was totally different from the Peter that we'd written, but was so much more Peter than we could have known, and that completely radically changed the script. Every one of the characters like that changes the script, and then the location does the same thing, where you boil the script down to kind of like what is the arc, what do these things mean, what are these elements, how do they work with each other, but how they're expressed, we want to leave kind of to the world for us to discover, and hopefully give these sort of mythic stories like a sense of a real grounded sense. And when you go and watch these films, they're not really an escape from life. They're kind of a deepening of your understanding of the experience of life.
And what about, did you ever feel kind of bound to the history of Peter Pan? Did you ever feel like there was anything that you had to include? There was anything that you had to that there was any kind of rules that you had to abide by?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a playground for us. I think that we wanted to think about Peter as Peter would do Peter, not as the baggage and the history of this story that's so problematic in so many ways. We wanted to really unshackle these characters from their history and dismantle a lot of what Peter Pan traditionally carries with it, and really kind of liberate Peter from that history and Wendy from that history, and kind of take them as, they exist almost, for me, Peter always existed as this deity of sorts. Like he was like this, he's like on your shoulder, telling you what to do. He's like a saint. The way that people grapple with these figures who span history, who have themes and, worlds that kind of surround them. Peter was always kind of a god of youth to me, and that was the way that we approached it. It's like, we're gonna sort of pay tribute to this eternal figure that's going to be reinterpreted over and over and over again, because he's so universal, and he's attached this specific universal experience that we all have of losing our youth and everything that we grapple with around that. And, and then we just sort of gave ourselves the tools of the history in order to help tell a new story, anywhere where the history could help us or surprise us or just give us context that we didn't have to explain. We didn't have to kind of get into, why do these kids not grow up? It's Peter Pan, they don't grow up. You didn't have to do a whole, so it helped us launch into the story. But once we were there, we didn't want to follow a path that had been followed before, or tell people a story that they'd already heard. So we, allowed ourselves room to really, run wild like a kid would.
I guess in that way, the film almost feels like a companion piece to Beasts, and there's so much sort of thematic territory that is similar, and also a lot of collaborators, I believe, that you worked with on both films. I want to talk a little bit about the music that you made with Dan Rumor, and how you guys worked together in scoring the film.
Yeah, I mean, the way that, Dan is definitely like, he's the virtuoso of us. I'm sort of like a primeval musician. But I write a lot of themes, and, as I sort of write the film, there's like a lot of musical ideas of what purpose music will serve in any given moment. And then I write a lot of kind of the bones of the melodies and the chords, and Dan will kind of, look at what I've done, reinterpret it, build on it, flesh it out, orchestrate it, things like that. But this one was interesting because with all the things that I wanted to be able to be fluid and discover and have change over the course of the process, this song that kind of runs through the movie had to be locked, because we had to sing it on screen, and the score in some ways needed to be premeditated, and that all sort of came back to like this idea of lullaby, you know, the idea of sort of like the memories of Wendy's mother and just kind of the connection to a mother, that being done through these songs that, at least for me, you know, like I hear these songs that my mom sang to me when I was an infant, and they bring me back to this connection to my mother that is so emotional and visceral and hard to explain. And so we wanted to create a song that kind of could travel between that and then being almost like a sea shanty, and, you know, one of these songs that feels eternal, that it's almost like it's always been around and that it sticks in your head, and that, and that would kind of be the glue of the score. So we really kind of started with this very simple melody, and then kind of expanded off that to fill out, you know, everything. The whole score is really about Wendy scoring her life. You know, the score is never kind of the filmmaker telling you what to think and feel. It's almost like Wendy is trying to tell you what to think and feel. You know, oftentimes she's interpreting her experience in a way that the audience would not, but it's her story, and she's allowed to kind of dictate the feeling with this sort of giant score that is in some ways just broadcast out of her mind.
No, that it makes sense, and it feels that way. There's kind of a life force to it that's beautiful. It pulls you through the story and in a really beautiful way. What about the edit? Did you, apart from Dan, who are the other collaborators that you also worked with on Beasts? Is there a certain group of people that you work with Court 13 that are involved in all of your productions, or was this crew largely new people?
It's a shape-shifting thing always. You know, a lot of the crew are the same, and certainly some extremely key people came into this film that will continue in the next one. You know, it's all shifting. It's not like there's like a membership or anything like that, you know. But you know, a lot of the same producers worked on both films, who were enormously important to sort of figuring out how to make a film that was this difficult. And, you know, obviously my sister and Afonso Gonçalves, who's one of the editors, was one of the editors on Beast as well. But that goes like all the way down the crew, you know, in the art department, and at every turn, you know, we, as much as we can, try to sort of, you know, bring the same family along, adding new members, and, you know.
So can you talk a bit about Court 13 and what that is, and how it sort of it works on a day-to-day level?
Yeah, well, it sort of evolved a lot over time. You know, it started kind of as, I mean, it started as an address. You know, it was always this, we'd call wherever we were working Court 13, and what it meant was kind of like a space where just artistic freedom ruled all. You know, it was about, you know, making art with sort of, you know, recklessness and freedom and defiance, and, you know, that, like, those principles have always kind of been at the heart of what it meant. It never was an actual organization of any kind. But then actually in the last couple of years, we've transformed it into it's now a nonprofit organization devoted to helping people make impossible movies. And so we've sort of like turned our attention a lot to sort of creating, doing mentoring and producing and trying to create a lab and a festival that all sort of celebrate and help people to take on impossible films. And when we say impossible films, that means kind of like, you know, it's because of what story you want to tell or how you want to tell it, or because of who you are, you know, what you're up against as a person. Someone would tell you that your film couldn't be made. And those are the films that I'm trying to make myself, and that we're trying to sort of create a culture and a community around, really pushing the boundaries of what's possible as far as who gets to make movies and what films get to be made.
Wow. And what kind of impossible films do you want to make next? Do you know what sort of thing you'd like to do after Wendy?
I do, yeah. I mean, I've had this time to think about it and figure it out. Although I don't think I can explain it, but you know, I'm really interested in kind of I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's about love. It's about time. And it's something that I'm going to start very, very small with, like, a couple of people that's going to grow as I do it. And it sort of straddles fiction and nonfiction. And Yeah, I don't have a good explanation or a pitch or anything like that, but
it's impossible to talk about things, I guess, when they're in that
yeah.
embryonic kind of stage. But I imagine you're the sort of filmmaker who will continue to work in the way that you work, because I feel as though you've kind of set up this methodology for yourself that makes the work itself feel really joyful. At least that's how it feels watching the movies. So yeah, I mean, I very much look forward to whatever it is that comes next.
Thank you.
And thanks, Ben. It's been really lovely talking to you, and congratulations again. I just think there's such a spirit to this movie. It's so impossible not to be swept up with it, and it's a really beautiful film.
Thank you so much.